If you grew up in the 1980s, you're part of a generation that experienced something truly unique. You witnessed the world transform from analog to digital, played outside until the streetlights came on, and learned to navigate life without the constant connection of smartphones and social media. But here's what most people don't realize: growing up in that specific era shaped your brain in ways that gave you psychological traits that are becoming increasingly rare today. Traits that psychologists are now studying with fascination. In this video, we're going to explore the distinctive characteristics that 1980s kids developed, why these traits matter more than ever in today's world, and how your childhood in that decade gave you advantages you might not even recognize. Let's dive in. The resilience of analog problem solving. Growing up in the 1980s meant you had to figure things out on your own. There was no Google to answer your questions instantly, no YouTube tutorials to show you how to fix your bicycle, and no GPS to tell you how to get somewhere. When you wanted to learn something, you had to consult encyclopedias, ask people directly, or experiment through trial and error. When your favorite toy broke, you didn't just replace it, you opened it up and tried to fix it yourself. This created what psychologists call resourceful problem solving. Your brain learned to work through challenges without immediate external assistance. You developed patience, creativity, and the ability to persist when solutions weren't obvious. Studies show that people who grew up before instant information became available tend to have stronger critical thinking skills and are more comfortable sitting with uncertainty while working through problems. This trait is becoming rare because today's children can find answers in seconds, which can actually prevent the deep cognitive work that builds problem-solving muscles. Genuine social connection skills. Here's something fascinating: if you grew up in the 1980s, you learned to communicate face-to-face during the most critical years of your social development. You made plans by actually talking to people, you resolved conflicts in person, and you read body language and facial expressions naturally. When you wanted to hang out with friends, you knocked on their door or called their landline, often talking to their parents first. This built social courage and interpersonal skills that many people today struggle to develop. Psychologists note that the 1980s generation possesses what's called high-context communication ability, the skill to read between the lines, pick up on subtle social cues, and navigate complex interpersonal dynamics without digital mediation. You also learned delayed gratification in friendships. If your friend wasn't home, you had to wait. If you had a disagreement, you couldn't just avoid them online, you had to work through it. This created deeper emotional intelligence and conflict resolution skills. Research shows that face-to-face social development during childhood creates stronger neural pathways for empathy and social understanding than digital-first socialization does. Independent navigation and spatial intelligence. Remember using paper maps? Asking for directions? Actually remembering how to get places? Growing up in the 1980s, you developed exceptional spatial intelligence and environmental awareness. You learned to orient yourself in physical space, remember landmarks, and create mental maps of your surroundings. When you went somewhere new, your brain actively processed the route, remembered turns, and built a cognitive map. This wasn't just about getting from point A to point B, it was training your hippocampus, the brain region responsible for spatial memory and navigation. Neuroscience research has shown that people who regularly use GPS navigation actually have reduced gray matter in their hippocampus compared to those who navigated without it. By growing up before GPS existed, your brain developed stronger spatial processing abilities. But it goes beyond just navigation. This spatial intelligence translates into better big-picture thinking, improved memory, and enhanced ability to understand complex systems and relationships. You learn to trust your own sense of direction and judgment. This builds confidence and self-reliance that extends far beyond just finding your way around town. Boredom as a creativity catalyst. This might sound strange, but one of the most valuable traits you gained from growing up in the 1980s came from something modern kids rarely experience: genuine, sustained boredom. Without constant entertainment at your fingertips, you had long stretches of unstructured time where you had nothing to do. And that's when magic happened. Psychologists have discovered that boredom is actually essential for developing creativity and imagination. When your mind isn't constantly stimulated by external sources, it turns inward and begins to generate its own ideas. In the 1980s, you created your own games, built forts from whatever materials you could find, invented elaborate imaginary worlds, and turned ordinary objects into toys. You learned to entertain yourself using only your imagination. This developed what researchers call creative self-sufficiency, the ability to generate novelty and interest from within yourself rather than relying on external stimulation. Modern research on attention and creativity shows that constant digital stimulation can actually inhibit creative thinking because the brain never enters the default mode network state where innovative ideas emerge. By experiencing regular boredom in childhood, you built mental muscles for innovation, imagination, and original thinking that serve you throughout your entire life. Risk assessment through real experience. If you grew up in the 1980s, you probably had significantly more physical freedom than children have today. You rode your bike around the neighborhood, climbed trees, explored abandoned places, and took risks that would make modern parents nervous. Here's what's important. Through these experiences, you learn to assess risk yourself rather than having adults constantly manage danger for you. When you climbed that tree, you learned to evaluate which branches could hold your weight. When you rode your bike down a steep hill, you learned to gauge speed and control. When you explored your neighborhood, you learned to read situations and trust your instincts about safety. Developmental psychologists call this calibrated risk-taking, and it's crucial for building confidence, judgment, and resilience. You literally trained your brain's risk assessment systems through direct experience. Studies comparing generations show that people who had more autonomous outdoor play in childhood tend to have better risk evaluation skills as adults, lower anxiety levels, and greater confidence in handling uncertain situations. You learned that minor injuries and failures were survivable, that you could fall, get back up, and keep going. This built psychological resilience that protected you from developing the heightened anxiety and risk aversion that's become more common in younger generations. Media literacy through limited channels. Growing up in the 1980s, you consumed media very differently than people do today. You had 3 or 4 TV channels, you watched shows at specific scheduled times, and you couldn't skip commercials or rewind. This created a unique relationship with information and entertainment that gave you some surprising advantages. First, you developed patience and the ability to delay gratification. If you missed your favorite show, you had to wait for a rerun. This trained your brain's impulse control systems. Second, because media options were limited, you were exposed to a broader range of content rather than algorithmic echo chambers. You watched what was on, which meant you encountered diverse perspectives and genres you might not have chosen yourself. Third, you learned to be selective about what you paid attention to. With only a few channels and limited viewing time, you made conscious choices about what to watch rather than endlessly scrolling through infinite options. Psychological research on decision-making shows that having too many choices can actually create anxiety and dissatisfaction, a phenomenon called choice paralysis. By growing up with limited options, you developed decisiveness and contentment that many people struggle to find in today's overwhelming media landscape. You also developed critical thinking about media because you couldn't fact-check things instantly. You learned to question sources, think independently, and form your own opinions rather than immediately searching for what others thought. Analog memory and deep focus. Here's a trait that might be the most valuable of all. If you grew up in the 1980s, you developed the capacity for deep, sustained concentration and strong memory formation. Before digital devices fragmented attention into constant interruptions, you regularly engaged in activities that required extended focus. You read books for hours, built complex projects, played games that took days to complete, and had conversations without checking your phone every few minutes. Neuroscientists have found that this kind of sustained attention actually changes brain structure, strengthening the prefrontal cortex's ability to maintain focus and resist distraction. You also formed memories differently. Because you couldn't instantly photograph everything or look up information whenever you wanted, your brain had to actually encode and store information. You remembered phone numbers, addresses, song lyrics, and countless details because you had to. This created stronger memory consolidation pathways. Research shows that relying on external memory storage, like smartphones, actually weakens our internal memory systems. By growing up before these tools existed, you developed robust memory capabilities. The ability to focus deeply without constant interruption is becoming so rare that psychologists now consider it a competitive advantage. In a world of fragmented attention, the capacity to concentrate on one thing for extended periods is almost a superpower. Balanced perspective on technology. Finally, here's perhaps the most important trait. Because you remember life before and after the digital revolution, you have a balanced perspective that purely digital natives don't possess. You're not afraid of technology, but you're also not completely dependent on it. You can see both its benefits and its limitations because you've experienced both worlds. This gives you what psychologists call technological wisdom, the ability to use digital tools effectively while maintaining human skills and connections that technology can't replace. You know when to use technology and when to set it aside. You can appreciate the convenience of smartphones while also recognizing what was lost when everyone became constantly connected. This balanced perspective is increasingly valuable as society grapples with the psychological effects of digital saturation. You serve as a bridge between generations, understanding both analog depth and digital convenience. Growing up in the 1980s gave you a unique psychological profile that combines resilience, creativity, social intelligence, focus, and balanced judgment. These aren't just nostalgic memories, they're genuine cognitive advantages that research is now confirming. You possess traits that are becoming increasingly rare: the ability to solve problems independently, connect with people authentically, navigate both physical and mental space, create from boredom, assess risk confidently, think critically, focus deeply, and use technology wisely without being controlled by it. In a world that's changing faster than ever, these traits make you uniquely equipped to thrive. You have the best of both worlds, the depth of analog childhood and the tools of the digital age. If this resonated with you, share it with someone else who grew up in the 1980s. And if you want more insights into how your generation's experiences shaped who you are today, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and remember, those traits that the 1980s gave you, they're not just memories. They're advantages. Optional hook for next video: next time, we'll explore how 1980s kids approach parenting differently, and why psychologists say they might have the healthiest balance yet. You won't want to miss it.